this is the most commonly used acronym when talking about gender and sexual diversity issues, and that's LGBTTQQI2SA. Now, what each of these is the L is lesbian, and this is a female identified person having sexual and or romantic attraction to another female identified person. And G stands for gay, which is predominantly for male identified people who have sexual or romantic attraction to other male identified people. Now, B stands for bisexual, and this is a person who has romantic and or sexual attraction to people of the binary gender spectrum, that being they have a romantic attraction to anyone who is male identified, as well as an equal attraction to people who are female identified. So there's a B, and then the T stands for transgender. Now this is an umbrella term for people who fall outside of the gender binary. And then the other T stands for transsexual, and that's actually underneath the transgender umbrella. Now, a person who is transsexual, I could take myself as that. That being, there is a major disconnect between my gender identity and my birth sex that creates a lot of discomfort for me. So I seek medical interventions such as hormone replacement therapy, surgeries, and all the like to have my gender identity match, well, my gender expression and my gender identity match what I feel inside, and that being male. You know, I was born female, but identify as male, and I feel way more comfortable when people can see me like that in every aspect of my life. And then there's queer, that's the first Q. This is an umbrella term that has been coming into play for the gender and sexual diversity community. And it's kind of like a reclaiming of the term, because back in the day it was used as a very derogatory slur against the gender and sexual diversity community, but now people are reclaiming it as a point of empowerment, you know. The other Q is for questioning. Now, this is for people who, you know, question their sexual orientation or their gender identity, and I think this is one of those terms that it's good to be aware of, because we all go through that at some point in our life, and that's a-okay, so long as we, you know, get to know ourselves. The I is for intersex. Now, this is for a person who was born and their genitalia wasn't necessarily strictly a penis or strictly a vagina. It was very ambiguous, and that's just a genetic sort of thing. Not a genetic sort of, just something that happens in nature. And the amount of intersex people is actually quite high. It's not well known. But their secondary sex characteristics as they get older into puberty can turn very androgynous, and that's what an intersex person is predominantly who they are. And you know what, their gender identity could be whatever they choose. That being, they could choose to be more female identified, or they could choose to be more male identified. Really, that's up to them to choose to do. Now, the number two, is for a two-spirit. Now, this is a term that was actually coined in Winnipeg in 1990 by a group of queer Aboriginal people that came together and realized the mainstream gender and sexual diversity community didn't have a term for them that showcased their culture, which had historically accepted queer Aboriginal people within First Nations ceremonies, within First Nations tribes. It isn't a literal term. I mean, there's not necessarily two spirits within one person. It's more along the lines of there are two identities that, for the most part, people see as almost separate, but for a two-spirit person are one and the same, and that being their queer identity and their Aboriginal identity. So they're not separate for them, but all together. And I use that term as well, two-spirit, because I feel very strongly with it. I identify with my culture. I identify as being a queer person. And yeah, that's two-spirit. Now S, I like to throw this one in as my different talks, because I find it's important for people who fall under this category to also realize that they are a part of the gender and sexual diversity community. There's no othering when it comes to talking about gender and sexual diversity, because we all have a gender and we all have some sort of sexual orientation, and all of it varies. It's all on a spectrum. So the S stands for straight, and this is a person of one gender binary who has sexual and or romantic attraction to the person of an opposite gender binary. So that being a male identified person having a sexual and or romantic attraction with a female identified person, and vice versa. Now the A stands for ally, and this is a person who stands up for queer rights or stands up for another marginalized group.